I was with him the night before. You know what I mean? We were going to start step one. And he was coming by in the morning to get the book, and he didn't come and get it. And I thought he flaked out again. So I don't chase people for their recovery, whether I love them or I don't. I let them figure out if they really want it. And he didn't show up, and I was like, I laughed it off, like, oh, he flaked out again, and by 6 o'clock that night, his brother had found me on Facebook, and he reached out, and he's like, I got some bad news. And I thought maybe he got pinched or something, because like me, I just don't think death, no matter what. I mean, I guess I always hope it's not death. And he said he passed away last night, he overdosed. And I was just like, what? Like, I was just with the dude,
So that was a little bit from today's conversation with Chad Valyear. Chad is a recovery content creator. He's a rock star. He also works in the recovery field. Amazing guy. We've become quite close over the last 6 to 8 months. What I really like about having these repeat guests on is that we don't get back into the addiction story, and we can just talk some recovery. So we had a really great conversation. We covered some things like ADHD today, how death is affecting us, and the death rates right now with the opioid epidemic. Just a great conversation all around. Listen, the title sponsor for today's episode is FAR Canada. That's Families for Addiction Recovery. They are a nonprofit organization doing amazing free services for the loved ones of people who suffer with SUD. You can learn more about them at farcanada.org. And in the meantime, enjoy the show. Hello, everybody, watchers, listeners, supporters of all kinds. Welcome to another episode of the Ashes Tossing Podcast. I'm your host, Chuck LaFlange, or Chris Horder, whatever you want to call me. And I'm checking in from Krabi, Thailand, halfway around the world. And I forget what city again, Ontario, is my good friend and returning guest, Chad Valyear. How you doing today, Chad?
Hey, man, what's happening?
Not so much, buddy.
Dirty old
Oshawa. I always forget. Yeah. I know you're not too far from Peterborough. That's all I remember. So
yeah,
and that's only because you said it to be pre-record. Let's be honest, right? Yeah.
An hour and a half, I think. Anyway. Apparently the drugs are worse out there than they are here, and it's bad here, man. And Peterborough is supposed to be even worse as far as the 10 cities. There's more of those out there. Like, yeah, it's supposed to be really bad.
Bigger population, Peterborough over Oshawa, no?
Actually, I don't think so. But
proximity to Toronto, then?
But I think it's much smaller. Yeah.
Oh, really?
That would explain probably why the epidemic's bigger out there, right? Smaller place.
Yeah, or more noticeable, or whatever. Yeah.
For demographic.
Yeah. It's crazy, man. It's crazy all over Canada, all over North America, right? And it's not gotten any better.
Well, it's really messed up because a couple weeks ago, a guy that I was working with in the program, he was 32 years old. He overdosed and died. I was with him the night before. You know what I mean? We were going to start step one. And he was coming by in the morning to get the book, and he didn't come and get it. And I thought he flaked out again. So I don't chase people for their recovery, whether I love them or I don't. I let them figure out if they really want it. And he didn't show up, and I was like, I laughed it off, like, he flaked out again, and by 6 o'clock that night, his brother had found me on Facebook, and he reached out, and he's like, I got some bad news. And I thought maybe he got pinched or something. Because like me, I just don't think death, no matter what. I mean, I guess I always hope it's not death. And he said he passed away last night. He overdosed. And I was just like, what? Like, I was just with the dude,
Fuck.
And, he was a guy, like, he kept wanting it. And again, I say this ad nauseum, man, like, we all think we got that one last time in us, and he was just, and that, I've lost a lot of people to addiction, like a lot of people. And I'm talking probably in the 40s since I came into recovery. Some people were closer than others, like, don't get me wrong, but they're all people I've had these types of conversations with, but because I had worked so closely with him, it really put a face on it for me, and the first thing I did, I hit a meeting, man, like, and I didn't want to go. But I knew that that's what I needed at that moment, because it was like I needed somewhere where I could just be open. Like, I can't walk into a restaurant and sit with someone who doesn't understand it and go, yeah, a friend of mine overdosed and died, because chances are they're going to go, well, if he did drugs, probably. Like,
yeah, right. Yeah. Even the most kind of
really
people,
get it,
most, even the most kind people. Most, not all, most certainly, feel like unless you have some lived experience, it's really just hard to get, right? You can be empathetic, but it's,
Right.
it's just hard. It's hard for them
Well,
to
you'd think it would
understand.
get
So,
easier, and it really doesn't like that. And don't get me wrong, I wasn't even as close to him. Like I worked close with him and I considered him a really good friend. Like I don't want to be misunderstood there. But there were closer people to me. Like, last year two of my nephews overdosed in Belleville.
oh,
Right.
wow.
And they were just young too, 33 and 19. Like they were young,
Jeez.
man. But this one hit me different. And I don't know why, or if it was just because maybe I was with him like the day before or what,
And who
right?
knows, right? There's so many contributing factors to something like that.
Right.
So many, right? And it's horribly sad.
You know?
Horribly sad, right?
Yeah.
I,
But
I, I often say,
it's
like,
not getting better.
I both look forward to and dread the day that it gets easier.
Mm-hmm.
And I often think and say that, like, because like
That's
yourself,
powerful. Yeah.
so many people, right? I think we've stopped. I'd have to go back and think, but I think it's been a few months now. But still, since I came into recovery, more people than months.
Yeah.
Right? I'm coming up on 2 years here, so right, like it's been a
Well, I
lot.
have a
You guys, a
guy,
lot. Just a quick interruption
35,
for the all too
37.
important PSA. Today's PSA is brought to you by AARC, that's Alberta Adolescent Recovery Center, located in, of course, Alberta, Canada. But they're doing some amazing things there, treating adolescents and the whole family. Really, it's a peer support system that's super next level. I keep saying it's revolutionary, but it's been around for 34 years. Just nobody's been talking about it. So check them out, guys, at arc.ab.ca. And in the meantime, use your PSA.
Hey everyone, Rachel, Addict with Purpose here. I just wanted to briefly share about two of my favorite medications out there, naloxone and Narcan. These are medications to help prevent accidental overdose. It doesn't matter who you are, addiction does not discriminate. There's crazy things out there today and people are dying at really high alarming rates. So this medication here is a life-saving device. You cannot recover if you are dead, and this is how we are saving the lives of people and helping people find recovery when they're ready.
Here, so right, like it's been a lot.
Well, I have a guy, 35, 37 years clean. And when I told him I was up in the 40s, he, jokingly said, "You're a lightweight." If he's been clean 37 years, how many people has he seen go?
Exactly.
And I do a thing through my group. I do H&I, so I'll bring meetings into things like detox centers or jails or things like that where people can't get recovery. You know what I mean? So I'll bring it in there, and I actually had that gentleman fill in for me that day because I couldn't go.
Yeah.
Like I just couldn't go and bring a message. It's like, I wanted to, but something in me and it's probably where I should have been, to be honest with you. Being of service might have helped me. But, when I seen him, he just looked at me and, there was a numbness, but a sadness. And he just looked at me and he goes, "Chad, I hate this fucking disease, man."
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, me too, man. Me too.
No shit. No shit. And with, the add-on to fentanyl and the scene over the last decade, I mean, it just keeps speeding up, right? There's a close friend of the show, lives in your part of the world, actually, Tammy, whose daughter is incarcerated right now. And Tammy's been quite open about her journey as a mother of somebody who's suffers with SUD. So I can speak to it because, I mean, she had a blog going for quite a while on my page, even so she's public about it, right? Trying to help other mothers relate. And her daughter's in jail and she's got all these conflicting feelings about it. And it's like, but she's safe, right? Like, when's the last time you went to bed not like knowing for certain your daughter wasn't going to be, overdose that night?
Yeah.
When's the last time?
Right.
It's been a very long time. So that's what it's come down to, right?
A friend of mine's, so my sister's baby dad years ago, he died. And at the funeral, I remember hearing a police car, the sirens go off as we're in the middle of this procession, right? And the mother looked over and said, "This is the first time I didn't wonder if that was for him," right? And that's how she lived for years, right?
Yeah.
It's like death sometimes isn't the worst case scenario.
No.
And that's a horrible thing to say, and I understand what that sounds like. But I know like a really close friend of mine too. Like again, we're on this thing, so all these things are popping in my head. But another friend of mine, I remember his brother overdosed, and I remember him saying, and this man's very spiritual, and what he said was so powerful. He said God was done watching him suffer and knew he wasn't going to get it, so he brought him home.
Yeah.
You know, and if you can look at something like that and bring it like that kind of spin on it, that's the kind of shit I want, you know?
Yeah.
Like I want to be able to, like, I mean, I know where I'm going after this anyway, so I'm not, dying isn't a fear necessarily for me. I mean, the ego in me doesn't want the world to go on without me, I'll be honest. Right?
What would we do?
But in all fairness, like I'm good. You know what I mean? Like my kids are taken care of, and so if I were to go tomorrow, I'm good with that. But I don't want to go out like that. You know what I mean? Like, and I tried to for years, and that was the thing. Like I always said that if, you know, somebody found me in a room with a rig hanging out of my arm, it would have been a lot more acceptable to see or understandable for my parents or my sisters, you know, to see that than if I'd have jumped in front of a train.
Yeah.
Right? It would have been easier to swallow for them for whatever, because they were expecting that, right?
Yeah. Which
you
is
know, my
awful.
sister used to say to me, my sister used to say, Chad, my thing with you is you'll do anything. Like, you don't have a drug of choice. You do, but it's called more. Right?
Yeah.
It's like,
right.
what else? And, you know, there's no drug you won't do. And she goes, and that's what terrifies me.
As it should. As it should.
I mean, and all we want to do is escape anyway. So it doesn't matter how that is. We have our preferences, but, you know, if I was out of dope and there was a bottle in the fridge, it didn't matter. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I hear you. It's a funny thing. It's not a funny thing. 2 years ago today, I can almost guarantee you that I would have had 0.5 gram or so of fentanyl on me, even though I never did it, because what if that was a day I finally had the guts?
Wow.
That was my mindset at that time, right? Because I just, you know, right? You just get so exhausted and tired of it and all the shit. And I would feel uncomfortable if I had to sell it, because then I didn't have it there as this weird sort of comfort thing, right? And that was normal for me for more than a year before I finally found recovery, right? You know, how fucked up is that?
I have a relative, and you know, he's in the grips, man. Like, he's hardcore in the grips, and you know, he's the guy that he says, like, every time he wakes up, he goes, "Fuck." Yeah. Right? Yeah. I got to do this again today.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like when he says that, it breaks my heart, man. But it's like, you'll either get tired or you'll follow through. Right? Mm-hmm. And I mean, I know, like, near the end of my using, and I shared it with you, and I remember, you know, the last time I was on your show, and I just remember, like, it was thought through, man. Like, I was done, and to get to that point, like, and that's the thing, and you know, when I was in treatment, and I knew the difference between the textbook warriors and the lived experience people, because there's no course or no textbook that is ever going to be able to show you the desperation of being on your knees, begging to either kill you or keep you alive.
No.
You know, and the tears and the fear and the sadness and the anguish and the disdain. And there's no book that'll fucking show you that, man. None.
Nope.
Right?
Nope.
And that's what I needed, though. You know, and every time I feel sometimes, you know, I rob somebody of their rock bottom. And I did that for years with my wife, my ex-wife. I did that for a long time. I deprived her of her rock bottom. You know, whenever it got too rough and she came back, I pulled her out of it. You know, and I had to stop doing that for me. You know, like, I can't, we carry the message, we don't carry the addict. And if, you know, my approach to recovery is not going, upsy daisy, buddy, you got this. You know, I'm the guy that goes, what the fuck are you doing? Like, you know what you're doing. Like, you gotta, like, do you want to die? Like, are you done yet? Are you tired? You know, I don't have it in me to baby you. And if you baby the addict, you'll bury the addict, right? And all these cliche sayings that I grew up laughing at, or like the things that I would find to make fun of, so I'd have a reason to walk away from my recovery, are all things that I get now because I've done all the don'ts.
That's a funny, peculiar. I got to stop saying funny. There's a peculiar concept there. Not even peculiar. Interesting, maybe is a better word. Why I'm picking apart my vocabulary right now, I don't know. But anyway, there's a metaphoric fence that I kept getting told about with the I knows. So the cliches that come at you, right? I know, but do you? Right? And then I'm going to say just before my 1 year mark, last October, right around the time that I decided that I was coming to Thailand, actually, this kind of thing where so much of it made sense all of a sudden. So many of the cliches, because that fence that divides your recovery from being about not using to being about growing, right? Where you just get the cliches all of a sudden. You get, because now it's the obsession's gone. I'm not thinking about it all the time. I mean, whatever. We're human and we're fucking addicts. So at the end of the day, I mean, you have some thoughts sometimes, some intrusive thoughts, but my recovery became about what can I do to improve myself and my life, and instead of what can I do to stay sober.
Well,
right?
when we realize that drugs aren't the problem, right? And I say that, I've said it a million times over, if drugs were the problem, they do the same thing to everybody, right?
Yeah.
And that's, when I took drugs out of the equation, I was still a piece of shit. And I had to work really hard at not being a piece of shit anymore. And those are the things that people, so like today, I have no desire, and I have a very healthy fear of drugs and alcohol, right?
Yeah.
The thought, and don't get me wrong. So two big things that people like to take out of the equation when it comes to recovery addiction is ritual and sedation, right? And ritual is a big one. And I'll tell you a funny story. My sponsor tells this story to me all the time. And I hear him tell it to a lot of newcomers. And it's like a lot of guys will get into drinking the non-alcoholic beer. And I don't know what it is about this testosterone-filled bullshit vibe of men have to drink beer. And, it's just nonsense to me, right? And it's like, when my sponsor years ago, one of the times he tried to get clean, his sponsor called him up and said, "So what's going on?" He's like, "I'm just sitting here having a near beer." Sponsor goes, "I'll be there in like 20 minutes. And the sponsor showed up with a spoon and some baking soda, started chopping up some baking soda lines. And my sponsor looks and goes, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Well, you're drinking some near beer. Let's smoke some near crack and do some near lines." Right? Like, what's the difference? And it's like, not really changing anything. You're just not high. Or you're not drunk.
Yeah.
So if you're not changing the behaviors, and that's the thing, and that was the big thing for people in my life today, is it's like, okay, so I'll use myself for an example today. So I can still break character really easily, and I can still be an asshole, and I can still get angry, and I still do all the things that human beings do. But my character defects today, they poke out from time to time. Right?
Yeah.
Right. When I watch people who run this gamut of being, full of the difference between clean time and recovery, right? When I see these people running this gamut of having recovery, and then as soon as things don't go their way, they revert. They just become the fucking asshole that they were, or the liar that they were, or the cheater that they were, or the piece of shit that they were, then there was really no recovery there. From my perspective, because it's like, if you can just jump back, like it would take a lot of work and a little bit of time for me to go back to the old Chad.
Yeah.
Right. Because first of all, I have no desire. But secondly, just like recovery didn't come to me in 15 minutes, the reversion wouldn't be, instant.
Well, my co-host Ryan, it took him 5 years from the beginning of his relapse till things finally went full blown. Right. It started with a few beers, and then over the course of, he fooled himself. And then eventually he ended up, in jail, not 5 months ago now, 6 months ago now, for doing something that really shouldn't have happened. But, it's,
and that's what happens. Like I often, like I said, I don't have the obsession to use, but it's like I was saying, the ritual. So like, say I'll go out for fellowship after a meeting or something, and I'll be eating wings, or I'll eat my food and drink my diet pop, and I'll look over and I'll see all the fellas over in the corner, cheersing a shot, and they're pounding back this shot. And I don't want the drunk feeling. I want that bonding. You know what I mean? But I have that. It's a different type of bonding for me now that I appreciate more. But there was a time when that was how, if I just met you at a bar, I'm like, hey, bro, let's do a shot. You know, do a
Oh
couple
yeah,
shots of Yag and game
of
on. And then
course.
we find the guy in the corner that's selling the blow. And then, you know, the next, you know, and I often sit and go, you know, I would get away with having a beer, maybe once, maybe
Yeah,
twice, but then it would be 2
yeah,
beer, a 40-pounder, an 8-ball, and a rig in my arm. And that's how fast that would happen. And
yeah,
it would only be a
yeah,
few days. And then I'm homeless and
yeah.
I'm
Right.
right. And
Absolutely.
there's never
Right.
going to be a different result for me. It's
Yeah.
ended the
Yeah.
same for
Yeah.
40 something years. At some
Right. But
point,
this time,
you know,
terminal uniqueness, though, right? I something that I talk pretty openly about. So in December of last year here, the whole loneliness thing about being in Thailand alone, and you know, it's things. I was having a really rough go, and of course, pot's legal here. You know, weed in Thailand, there's a fucking dispensary. You know, if you go to the tourist areas, 3 on every block, right? It's insane the amount of them. And it's like, I could smoke a joint, and I still like, still a part of me that's like, I could have a beer. Alcohol was never my problem. You've heard this how many times from people, right? Like, you
at
know,
least once a
there's still that
day.
part of me that wonders about that. But I resisted the urge, thankfully. And then it was, you know, a month or two later when I was feeling better, and it occurred to me, it's like, I haven't had the urge to go buy a little bit of weed or have a beer since I started feeling better.
Right.
That tells me that I am never to go have a puff or have a beer, because that I'm doing that. The urge only comes when I feel like shit.
Right.
Right. Like
Not to be
when I'm
cloudly.
depressed and not feeling good. Right. And I'm glad that I was able to identify that those months later. Right. I'm a pretty introspective person. But now, like, yeah, man, I'm fucking hyper aware of that. Right.
Yeah.
It's when I'm feeling down that I have those thoughts.
Right.
Right. So, you know, work on whatever's making you, you know, feel that way, instead of, you know, looking at a way to self-soothe it. Because, right. You know,
Yeah.
that's
Well, I
not
had
going to
a
go
friend
anywhere good.
recently, I wouldn't say a friend, someone I know, kind of so they were sort of punching downwards when they were talking to me, right? And like they do it under the guise that they're interested in what I have to say, but then they, you know, they'll sort of down punch on me, right? And it's like, but you know, I kind of dig that because I can kind of play back on it a little bit, and I'm kind of an asshole that way, right? But anyway, they
Yeah.
were saying to me, you know, like, you know, you really like to put yourself out there, eh? On the social media and talk about your recovery. And, you know, and I hear that a lot, you know, that Chad likes to put himself out there. He's pretty full of himself. And it's like, well,
Fuck off.
no, like, first of all, like anybody who talks to me, like, so I can present myself well, and that's great because I'm never short of words. But there's a few things that factor in there. One, if you talk to me for any length of time or got to know, you know, my heart, first of all, you'd see my imposter syndrome. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like if people ever really got to know who I am on the inside, they probably hate me, right? But that's something that I'm working through. That's part of my recovery, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Secondly, I used to talk so much shit and do things to get reactions or do things to fuck with people. And now I'm just, and I'll say like about 85% sure most times about what I want to say, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But the
Yeah.
big one is this, is I put myself out there to hold myself accountable, because I
Yeah.
really talk a lot about change, recovery, hope, faith, music,
Yeah.
all of it. So if I fuck up, right, it's gonna, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, it's not just, I'm not going to be able to hide it. And I don't want to be able to hide it. Like, I need to be accountable. And, you know, 3+ years in my recovery, I mean, I've been in recovery 9 years, but it took me 9 years to get 3+. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it's like, so that
Yeah.
didn't come overnight. And it's like, I don't want to, if I don't make recovery, you know, at the center of everything I do, like, it'll be way too easy to back away from it or walk away from it. You know,
Yeah.
even my new job, I got a job in recovery now. Like, I work at a pre-treatment center, right?
Congrats
And
on
I
that,
love
by
it
the way.
because
Yeah.
I see these guys come in fresh, and I get to build really great bonds with these guys, right? Some are ready
Yeah.
for that bonding, some not so much. It's just part of the job, right? Like, as much as I love my job, it has those moments where some guys just aren't going to connect with you, and that's okay. Maybe they're not ready. Maybe they just don't like me, and I'm cool with that. Right. But I'm there to make sure they know that there's hope, and putting myself in the middle of something, seeing that so fresh keeps me clean, man. You know?
Yeah. Right. Huh. Yeah. I've often wondered about that. It's actually like next year when I'm done my education visa here in Krabi, Thailand, of checking out Chiang Mai, Thailand, which is where there's a whole bunch of treatment centers, and maybe looking at getting into the field, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want a real 9 to 5, but I think I have a place for sure. I mean, I know what I'm good at, what I'm not good at, but we'll see. We'll see. It's certainly something that I've been thinking about.
Like guys like us bring a lot because I mean, we have authority, right? Yeah. My favorite is when somebody tries to tell me I don't understand how they feel. You don't get it. And it's like, I'm pretty sure I do. And you know what? I don't live your life, but I can tell you, I know your desperation right now. And I know your arrogance because I used to have
it. Yeah. A lot of that.
Your little disguise doesn't work on me.
So Chad, before we get too far, I mean, we're almost halfway through the episode now. Nice. There's a couple things that I want to talk with you about, most certainly. One is what's going on, what you got going on as far as your music and your new endeavor that you're working on.
Yeah.
And the other was a conversation that we started to have yesterday that, we kind of, backed away from and decided to save for the episode here today. Of course, it's about medications and the like. So for some background, for anybody that's listening, Chad recorded a PSA about carrying Narcan, which is very passionate about. By now, at this point in the episode, you've heard one sponsored by whoever's sponsoring it for this episode. Very passionate that everyone should carry Narcan. I don't here in Thailand because it's not really, opiates aren't really a thing here, which is funny. We're in Asia, but it's not really a thing at all, right?
That shocks me.
Yeah. It really does, right? It's weird. Like, they do not have an opioid problem here. They have a meth problem here, and they have something called yaba, which is a dirty version of meth and caffeine mixed together. Yeah, it's it's a dirty. Right. But they don't have an opioid problem here at all. So, and even if they did, it's weird for a foreigner to approach. Yeah, that would be a weird thing to do. But back in Canada, I most certainly did, and if I ever went back, I most certainly would. So, thank you for recording that. And then, the conversation after that, something to the effect of, we should do. I had said something about ADHD, and you said, we should do a PSA about Ritalin. To which I responded, about the need for it. You expressed your disdain for it. Where's that come from, Chad?
So I'll tell you, like, my whole life, I had been diagnosed with ADHD, ADD. I was that kid that needed the attention, right? I didn't stop.
Yeah.
And my mom didn't put me on it, thankfully, right? Now, and I'm very, very grateful for that to this day. But as I got older, and focus for me is hard. And I still, even at work sometimes, like, I'll get, not in trouble, but I'll get the Chad, like, because as soon as something comes up, like, I'll be in the middle of something and all you got to do is start talking about something else. And I'm over here and I'll forget the task at hand. I'm on to the next thing. And that's just been my life. Right. Yeah. And the irony of the medication as I get older, doctors would try to prescribe me is I didn't want to rely on a drug. So as my life proceeds, but I remember, so down here in Canada, I don't know if it's still a thing because I've been out of the loop for so long. But a lot of people will do Ritalin, right? They'll crush up Ritalin and snort it. And they do it. I remember a friend of mine at the time saying to me, a few years back, if you crush up Ritalin and snort it, it'll be like the best blow you ever did. And I'm like, sweet, it's cheap. Awesome. So I grab a couple pills and I crush them up and I snort them and I sit down and read a book, watch TV. It worked the opposite for me because I needed it. Right. But I find what happens. So especially with kids, it terrifies me because we've gotten to this place in the world where it's almost like people forget we're supposed to feel shit. You know what I mean? If a kid has a hard time paying attention, then do something that will help that. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. And I'm not, okay, so I got to be careful because I don't want to shit on teachers, right? But I feel
Yeah.
like a lot of teachers, you know, it's like, I'm here to do this. And if this goes outside my box, then, you know, just put the kid on some meds so I don't have to deal with it. And it's
That's an
like,
education system thing, I think, more than an individual
yeah.
teacher,
So, I
right?
mean, unfortunately, the teachers are the ones that have
Yeah.
to enforce it. So that's fair. Thank you. And
Yeah.
so with that being said, it's like nobody, you know, there was a time when people got into teaching because it was like a passion job. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They wanted to make a difference. And now
Mhm.
it's just become a job, right? I think to some people. And again, I can't speak for all teachers, but I just see how it's working, right?
I'll interrupt that, Chad, just to say, because I've spoken to my fair share, weirdly
Sure.
enough, of teachers, and I actually pretty good friends with a couple back home who I've watched go from the beginning of their career to now 15 years or 20 years into their career. And I think, just like cops, so many of it get in for one reason. Time changes that for them,
Right.
Having to work within a system that's not designed, you know, like you've got the entire policing and court system. They're designed, it's punitive, it's shitty, and it's so how, as a cop, how do you work within that to make a difference? As a teacher, how do you work within a system that's designed as such to make a difference? And over time, that turns into apathy,
Right.
and eventually, it's just my job. It's no longer a passion.
Right.
So I can see, you know what I mean? So I think teachers still are getting into it for the right reasons.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
so that's the point I get to. But over time, that gets beaten out of you.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
You know
Like
what?
it just-
And that makes perfect sense. So I'm glad you actually shared that with
Yeah.
me because that makes a lot more sense to me. Right. And but
Yeah.
that also being said, you know, these kids, you know, we're taught that you have to sit still at all times. And it's like, what fucking kid, you know, should have to sit anywhere for 8 hours and get a 15-minute
it's
recess?
insanity, right?
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I can't do that as an almost 50-year-old man, you know, and I'm sitting here looking at these poor kids. And I mean, I wasn't good with it. And that's why they wanted to med me up, you know. I have a nephew who's on the spectrum and they wanted to just dose him right up. And my sister was not having it, man. She was like, not a chance. This kid is now, you know, he's very high functioning. And you wouldn't even know. Like he doesn't really have, I mean, unless you look at the way he lines things up in his room or the way things have to be set up a certain way. But it's like, there's a difference between Rain Man and Sheldon Cooper. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, and that's why it's spectrum because, you know, it's very broad. You know, to say Asperger's or autism or words like that, it's just kind of like throwing a fish in a bucket, you know, like you don't know where it is. So you say spectrum, but like, meds are not the answer to everything, you know. And
so you got me wound up on a couple, not wound up, but like there's a couple things passionately there. So
no, educate me, man. I'm in.
So well, and all I can do, so I'm going to parrot a lot of what Dr. Lisa, my co-host on the weekends, and
Sure.
I don't think you've had the pleasure. I'm going to have to get you on for a weekend round with Dr. Lisa.
I've heard her.
She is so amazing.
She's cool
yeah,
man. Yeah.
She's amazing, right? So, and for anybody that's new to the platform and doesn't know, Dr. Lisa is a psychiatrist who specializes in addiction. No lived experience as an addict. Her brother, 25 years, been in the fight. So what she brings is being the loved one of somebody, right? What's really cool about Lisa, and I'm sure I probably shared this with you before, Chad, but I'll just share again, is that she was well into her career as an oil field engineer when she decided to go back to school to become a psychiatrist to further understand her brother's struggle. So she's one of a kind. She's one of my favorite human beings on the planet. And she knows her shit. She's like, you know, psychiatrist. There's a lot of education that goes in behind that. And one of the things, so like there's a misconception about ADHD that it's about hyperactivity.
Right.
That's one of the symptoms, right? So there's a difference between a hyper kid and somebody with acute ADHD.
Right.
There's a big difference. So like she'll say, by the time she's talking to somebody, and she doesn't deal with children specifically, of course, it was part of her education. You know, she has to do some time with that and speaking to specialists in that. By the time a kid gets to see a psychiatrist, it's not about hyperactivity. Like if you think about the healthcare, what's it take to see a psychiatrist in Canada?
Right.
You know what I mean? It's no longer about
a long
right. You're fucking right, it is, right? So by that point, we're talking about somebody with serious acute ADHD, right? So it's not about hyperactivity. For me, I wasn't a hyper kid at all. I was not focused. Fuck, not focused. I was disruptive. We were talking pre-record. Like, oh, Chris, front of the class, first day, like, let's go, right? Like, I was that guy, right? For sure, most certainly. But I wasn't hyperactive by any standard, by any mark of the imagination. So the thing with ADHD is, and what I've come, and remember, I was undiagnosed until 2 years ago, year and a half ago, I guess now, right? I had no idea. And then all of a sudden, things like stimulants made sense to me, where everyone else is up peeking through the blinds and under the fucking door and through the peephole, and I'm sitting there chilled, right? Yeah. Which I imagine you could probably relate to.
I was
right?
exactly like that. Like, that's how I got when I was high on blow or crack.
That's because of the fucking, me too. Like 100% me too. Yeah. It's like, what the fuck are you guys all doing, man? Like, I'm like, chill, right? Like, paranoia. Never met a drug that made me paranoid. Like, ever.
Maybe in my head a little bit, but like, I didn't get up and, I knew they weren't
none of that
through
shit,
the window
right?
for my gram of crack.
No. It was like coming home, those stimulants were, right? It was like, oh, yeah, okay, I'm here. This is good. Yeah. I like this, right? Yeah. So, and then it was pointed out by a friend's wife. She's like, fuck, of course you do. She was the first one to kind of bring it to my attention. So I'll go off on a bit of a tangent here. One of the hardest things I had to deal with after that, one of the most tempting times to relapse for me was when the fucking chaos would become so much. I was having a hard time navigating the healthcare system when I was still back in Canada to see a psychiatrist, to get medication for ADHD and all that. Because now stimulants are very really heavily regulated in Canada, right? It just wasn't working out for me. It's like $40 in a phone call, man. That's all it would take. Like $40 in a phone call, and I could not feel like this. Fuck. So that was hard for me, right? But for a long time, and you're right, kids you're hyper, you need pills, and Ritalin was overprescribed for a very long time.
Adderall, all that shit. Yeah.
It really was, right? So post our conversation yesterday, I said to Lisa, hey, I'm gonna have a conversation tomorrow. I want some talking points so I know what the fuck I'm talking about. So like I'm armored up, bro. That's where I'm at right now with this, right? Full disclosure, right? Because I tend to bastardize things, right? So when I try and speak, so I'm surrounded by these highly intelligent people. I'm basically high functioning special needs. So like I'm like, I like to get my shit together. And so I said, can you give me some talking points? And one of the things, Ritalin is a fast acting, or short lasting. Right. So it's not used that much anymore. Not as much as it was, because those drugs typically, and to say it, as a general rule of thumb, anything quick on, quick off is less safe. So they don't really do that. I can't remember the name of the drug I was using in Canada that I was obviously prescribed legally and never got from a friend, but it was like a slow release Ritalin. When I took it, it was right. Like it was just, oh my God, the chaos. And it makes me think, and I think about it all the time now that I'm here, and getting ADHD meds in Thailand is not going to happen for me. It's just not. Right? Like they're really heavily regulated, really hard to get, expensive. It's just because everything here, if it's a stimulant, it's meth, because of the meth problem here in Thailand, right? So the government is just absolutely anti anything to do with it, which is unfortunate. But when I think about how much negative self-talk comes as a direct result of my ADHD, and this is something I think you can probably relate to. I didn't get that done. Task paralysis. Fuck, why didn't I do that? Right? Fuck, I forgot. The ADHD tax. Like fucking having, do you know how many times I paid for a fucking lockout and then found my keys a day later?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and there's all that TikToks about ADHD and the fucking, where's my keys and whatever.
There's so much more to it, man.
It's not about hyperactivity. It's not about losing your keys. It's about fucking hating yourself all the time, about being pissed off at yourself for something all the time, and how hard that is for somebody to navigate. So when I think about this and I go, fuck, like, and my mom was not a medication person at all. Right. And she didn't even catch that I might have it. We were 17. We had a quick conversation once, and that was the only conversation that ever happened. By then I had been out of the house for 3 years. So it wasn't even an option for mom to go through the process and get me medicated. So this is not a finger pointing in any way at her, most certainly. But I think about, had I grown up not being pissed off at myself all the time, how different would my life have been? How many addicts, when you start that conversation, and I can tell you from hosting this podcast, so fucking many. It's just, I didn't fit in. I was different. I did drugs. I felt like I belonged. You've heard it. You've heard it 1,000 times, right?
What happened?
How much of that is a result of being fucking pissed off at yourself all the time, right? And how hard that is on somebody. You know, even now it's hard on me. Had I not had the therapy and that entire experience at Yatra when I got here, I don't know what that negative self-talk would do to me. Mike helped me navigate that a lot through therapy. But like, man, there's a list of half a dozen things that I need to do that I should have done within the last few days that I have not done. I've had the time. I don't know why. And I'm pissed off at myself for it, right? But I've done that my whole life. So how different would my life have been? Would I have felt the need to self-soothe so much had I been medicated young, right? And I'm sorry I'm ranting here.
No.
A couple more points here to make. So Lisa's quote here in her message to me, right? Evidence shows that untreated ADHD is a risk factor for substance use disorder and anxiety, right? So that that's a clinical, there's a ton of peer review paper. We've talked about this at length on the show before. There's a ton of evidence to support that a kid with untreated ADHD is much more likely to end up in substance use. Much more. For all the reasons I just said, I imagine.
Yeah.
Right? I can only guess at that. But the causality. But there is no doubt that the two are connected.
Right.
Right? So, meaning that if we don't treat a child with ADHD, they're much more likely to develop addiction than if. Some theories that anti-ADHD puts people at a high risk of addiction because they are trying to self-medicate. So that, to me, that's what I was just saying. And also, a symptom of ADHD is impulsivity, Chad. Someone who's impulsive, act now, think later, is at a greater risk of experimenting with drugs, which increases the risk of addiction. Chad.
Yeah.
Right? So I'll ask you, with all of that information and a different lens to look at it through, when you say you're thankful your mom never put you on medication,
right? Okay.
Can you look back at that and ask yourself, fuck, what if?
100%. And so, first of all, that was super powerful, and thank you for that. First and foremost, that was huge. Secondly, I guess, because you just pointed out a very big difference in the two for me, I guess where I was trying to go with that, where I kind of lost sight, and I'm really glad that you pointed a lot of that out, is I think my concern with it was that they're just putting kids on meds before they're sure. Right? Yeah. There's a hyper kid.
Which happened.
Put him on pills.
There's a fucking generation that happened to.
So everything you said and everything Dr. Lisa put on there makes 100% perfect sense. And you know what? All those things that you pointed out about all the things you've dealt with, I've gone through. Right? All the things that, you know what I mean? And as you're going, Chad, I'm going, you're right. And and I needed to hear that today, you know, and that is why this whole thing happened. Right? Because it's like, you know, but like, again, back to, you know, putting it out there. I see guys so fresh coming into recovery, and they're on like 15 different medications, right? For all these things. Yeah. And those are the things. So, you know, those are the things that concern me, because it's like, how many of those things were just, you know, prescribed because, I felt like this, or I feel like this, or I don't want to have to feel like that. Right. And I think I think that was where I was trying to go with it. And it definitely got mixed up there in the translation. But you know, when I realized, you know, that, you know, a lot of the work that I had to do on the inside is now stuff that, you know, the stuff that I would have taken medication for, I learned to work through, you know, through doing different types of therapy, counseling, things like that. Right. And you're right, though, because like the stimulants did the same thing to me. Right. The stimulants were the things that
when I heard you talking,
down.
I was like, oh, yeah. Right.
You know what I mean? Like I get quiet. That was the worst tell for Chad Valyear, was as soon as he shuts up, something's wrong. Right. So I do a couple rails or a couple blasts, and I just sit there, and everybody's going, what the fuck's wrong with this guy? right?
Yeah.
And so that's what I mean. And that's why when I did Ritalin, it was just like, you know?
Yeah.
But you're right. Like, I guess what it comes down to is I think before the prescriptions are written, proper diagnoses should be made. And we shouldn't be treating it like a car engine. You know, like it could be this,
Yeah.
it could be that, it could be this. Let's make sure we know.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think if I can take anything from that and come back with you know, how I presented it and try to fix that up a little bit, that's where I would go with it.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Man.
It's like fentanyl.
Yeah.
Fentanyl to somebody with a 3rd-degree burn is a pretty amazing fucking thing.
Pretty wonderful.
You know what I mean? Like, it's not a bad thing at all. It's a great thing. I watched them, just crazy story. I watched them use a fucking cordless drill. I think it was a DeWalt, and drill into a dude's shin bone and put an IV fentanyl in there. I shit you not, because he had got burns from a battery. Yeah, right. Like, because apparently into the marrow is the best way to, like, the fastest and most effective way, right? But like,
you're giving people ideas, Chuck.
Fuck, sorry. Yeah, right. Go back to
go
boofing.
grab the drill. I'll be right back.
Yeah. Right. No. Trust me. Fuck. Right. Yeah. I'll do you, then you do me. Right. I'll most shampoo you for it. But fentanyl is not a bad thing, right? People, well, why did they invent a drug like that? They invented a pharmaceutical that would seriously help people that were in horrible kinds of pain.
Right.
We went and fucked it up.
And that's what we
you know what I mean,
though, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, there's never money
right?
in the cure, and that's what it always comes down to. Like, I think methadone's a great drug if there's a plan.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Right.
I know there's people who don't have the luxury to spend 14 days in withdrawal, right?
Yeah.
I think, all the, drugs were invented for a reason. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Novocaine isn't a bad drug either. You got a toothache.
No.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
So it's like all these things that we've abused and turned into, like, it all started out from a good place, I think.
Yeah.
And that being
of course,
said,
typically anyway, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's,
and then we learned that, I remember back before I crushed my hand in a machine at my job. And that's how so because I was already, cocaine was my drug of choice at that point. When it turned into opiates was when I crushed my hand in a machine at work. Right. And I'd done the odd perk or something, to just get that little warm thing. But then when, 2 doctors within a week prescribed me 400 perks each for my crushed hand that I was waiting to have plastic surgery on. And they were doing that every 2 weeks, giving me 800 perks, and then I'm realizing, if 2 pills make me feel this good, how would 5 make me feel? And then how would 10 make me feel? And then I'm doing 10, 80 milligram oxys a day. You know what I mean? And between 5 and 10, whatever I could get my hands on past 5, I did. It was very often 10. People are like, I'm surprised you're fucking alive. I'm like, me too. But that's a reality, right? But I'm telling you, like, when my hand was, looked like a lightning bolt and it was mangled, those perks were wonderful. When I was laying there puking, crying, and shitting my pants, they weren't so wonderful.
Not so much.
Right?
Yeah. Fuck.
But anything that feels good for me anyway, no matter what, like, I just want more of it all the time. That's just the way it works for us, man.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I appreciate that so very, very much.
Yeah, man.
Really too, right? Fuck. What's going on in? I know what's going on, but let's talk about what's going on. Make it sound like it's all unscripted and whatever. We know what's going on. Valyear. We've been talking pre-record, of course, about some of those things. So you're starting a podcast.
Yeah. So
well,
what happened? It's because it's kind of been an idea for a long time, but I've had my logo done for like a couple of years, and I thought about it, but it was like, to me, when I first got into recovery, I wanted to be the voice for the voiceless, and I was going to you know, any addict I was going to save. And, you know, I started doing it. And like, I would go on these big fucking rants on Facebook, dude. And they were unbearable. Like some of them come up in my memories and I'll fucking delete them. They're so embarrassing. Right.
Just cringe.
Oh, dude. And I can only imagine the people that actually cared about me reading this going, fuck, John, like, what are you doing? Right. But anyway, you learn from that shit, right? You learn some humility. You learn that you don't know everything. You learn that everybody that came before you was doing that. My favorite thing is when a guy gets into recovery and he gets out of treatment, he goes, I'm going to be a counselor. Every fucking guy I know that gets out of treatment is going to be a counselor, right? But I go, that's awesome, man. I hope so. Right? Just like, so when social media started really blowing up, when I first got into recovery like 9 years ago, and I was doing my lackluster versions of it, you know, I thought about, you know, maybe being that person. I started this thing that was a joke for a while called I Hate Chad. And it was like, I actually got a t-shirt that was made and, you know, got my face with a big line through it. But, and I was trying to do this thing and I was trying to inform people and the videos were fucking, it looked like a really bad after school special. Like, and I was posting them like with pride and going, and people are going, this guy's a fucking loser. What's wrong with this guy? He's a smart guy. Why is he doing this? And it was just like, how can I get my face and my words and my knowledge? And it was just so important that everybody thought I was clever. And I was working with a lot of surface knowledge. And then people would fucking
a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing.
and then I'd be like, I'd have no answers. And I looked like a fucking clown because I was working on her. And it was humbling, man, because, you know, I would even like, you know, even when I was at meetings, I wasn't there to learn. I was there to listen and say something even more clever. So somebody thought I was the smartest guy at an NA meeting. You know, I'm so fucking smart. I'm sitting here. You know what I mean? So I really just kind of put the idea away for a bit. And then when I started changing, like when I really started taking my recovery serious, and then I did the documentary with Sugarman. Right. And I did that. Yeah. And then with the book coming, like I'm about halfway through the book now. It's taken me a bit. There's been some blocks, but I'm realizing that I do have some pretty valid things to say. Right. And it's like the more times I get on things like this, or, you know, I remember, you know, I did one of the other podcasts and I remember they had to cut it, but they didn't want to. They said like, I feel like everything that was said here was valid. And I hate that I have to cut this into an hour. Right. And then I did one with you. And I remember at the end, you said to me something along the lines of, why are you doing this? Like, this seems like this would be your jam, you know? And then like, there's constant people going, I see you on these things. Why aren't you doing it? And then I kind of just was like, why aren't I doing it? Right. Like I maybe should try it.
Why not?
And see what happens. And I mean, this would, if it sucks, this won't be the first thing I failed at. You know what I mean? Like so what? I think, and it could be really cool or it could be really shitty, you know? And
you know, after almost 2 years and 200, I think this is episode 270.
Nice.
We're recording right now. Which is an insane, like if you do the math on that, that's fucking nuts, man.
Yeah.
Like that's a lot of episodes, right? Patience in letting it grow.
Yeah.
Is probably the hardest thing, realizing that your thing is never going to be the thing to everybody else. It's only going to be a thing at best.
Right.
Right. So to the closest person to you in the whole world, it will never be the thing. It will be a thing. Right. And that's something to remember. But I think you're at a point, especially because you have all the experiences as a musician, you know, of some notoriety, right?
Yeah.
So you kind of appreciate how that takes some time to build,
yeah,
right? Maybe more so than other people would have.
Sometimes. You know?
Yeah, right.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, and then one day it just kind of clicks, right? So I had one guest on about 6 months in. I had one guest on that completely changed everything, right? And our Spotify downloads went through the fucking roof, like to numbers that are kind of unbelievable, really, right? And of course, my YouTube is it's not very substantive. Facebook, we do much better at than we do YouTube. But realizing that, like, I was begging people for a like and a share, friends closest to me, like, really, right? It was like, you know, and why won't you? Why wouldn't you? And I don't know. And it doesn't matter because to them, it's a thing. To me, it's the thing.
Right.
And remembering that like, You know what I mean? And to some people, it's going to be a great thing, and they're going to pay a lot of attention. They're going to be passionate.
Yeah.
So, but you have the background that I think you can kill it, man. Like, you
Well,
can
I
kill it.
appreciate
I
that,
know
man.
you will, right?
I hope so.
You know.
And it's like, I know a lot of people, man. And I know a lot of people that have some really cool things to say. And I've met a lot of people in recovery. I've met a lot of people in music. And I might not know all these big famous rock stars, you know, but I know some people who've done some things. And I'm sure their stories are great.
Yeah.
You know, and especially if it gets down to the things, you know, like anybody who knows me knows it always comes down to faith, recovery, music, and tattoos, right? You know what I mean? So it's like we're gonna tackle some things, and you know, I'm gonna stick to what I know, and I'm not gonna, you know, reach too far outside of that, and you know, and throw the shit to the wall and see what sticks, you know, and
yeah, man.
And I got some great guys. Like
I've done a lot of that.
You reached out, man. Like guys like you and guys like, you know, Jared and guys like that will reach out and be like, hey, you know, this will help, you know, because we're all a team here. And that's the one thing I love about this community that you guys have invited me and allowed me to be part of, you know, is it's like you guys all seem to stick together. You know, when I look around and I see, you know, Rachel and Chantel and Jamie and you and Jared, and like we're all like on each other's shit all the time. And I love that, man, because if you look, even when you look at music back in like the Johnny Cash and Waylon Jennings days, you know, Johnny Cash had that show, and it wasn't uncommon for those guys to always be on each other's songs and playing and singing and doing their thing and on their shows. And it's like, and those are, when you look back on those are the shit, man. Like you see, you know
what it's competition happens at the bottom, collaboration happens at the top.
Right.
Like, fuck that, man. Like, I'm not out here trying to fucking compete with you. I want you to do well. I want you to kill it.
Right.
You know what I mean? And then, so yeah, you know, it is great. It really is
to connect. It's because I know I respect what you guys are doing. You know, I'm not called, like, trust me, man.
And
like,
likewise,
there's some places I wouldn't fucking contact. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Like, I'm like, I don't need to be on that show. I'm cool. Yeah. Right. And I don't want
and I can tell you, I would never sit here and list off names, but I've come across some of the most toxic ego on the planet.
Yeah.
In the recovery content world.
Sure.
Right. Like, I've just disgusted, put off, grossed out, you know, by some of what I've seen. And it's taken me, just like, we're all human, right? So remembering that you just don't have to be a part of it.
And that's where I just wouldn't engage, and I don't need to. And it's like, you know, it's funny because, you know, there's going to be some discernment when it comes time to putting people on, because, you know, there's a lot of people that reached out, right? I'll do it. I'll do it. I'll do it. And it's like, but
of course there is.
What are you bringing? Right? Like, you better have something, right? Because it's like, I don't want to just sit and talk shit. You know, I mean, maybe a little bit, but like not like the whole episode have no content, you know? Like, if there's nothing, you know, and I don't mean that with any ego. Like, I bring so much. I just mean, like, you know, let's talk about some stuff, man. Let's give some people a podium to make some change. You know?
Man.
Because the problem is if
I'm excited for you.
Sorry,
I really am. I said I'm excited for you. I
thank you.
You know, again, like, you know, I told you when we first started talking, I think you should, you know, you'd be great at it. So I'm really glad that you've decided to take that step, right? And of course, and to yourself and anybody else who wants to create one, I take a lot of pleasure in passing on some of the knowledge I've gained the hard way, right? Like, I don't want anybody to have to spend the kind of time and money it took me to figure some of the most basic things out, right? And like, here's a funny thing about pot. Like, so when I started out, I may have told you this before. I had a Windows 7 laptop with no microphone and no headphones.
Oh.
Right? Like, less than 2 years ago, that's where I was at. Like a year and a half ago, a year to 8 months ago, right? With a Windows 7 laptop, no microphone and no headphones. Just no idea. I couldn't make a meme. I couldn't, like, you know, edit sound, video. Fuck. Like, those so far out of my, you know. And for the first 4 or 5 months, I YouTubed, I tried, like, I talked to friends that, you know, I thought might be able to help me out. And tried, you know, with great intent. And it was one day I was like, I'll bet you there's a Facebook group or two about podcasting. And oh, look, yeah, there is, with tens of thousands of people, right? And then instantly, so I went from spending all this time and money throwing shit at the wall, and I mean from a technical side of things and from the back end production side of things, to, oh, okay, try this, boom, tried this, and then try this, boom, tried this. And all of a sudden, my time and energy was going into making great content instead of trying to figure out what the fuck I was doing. Right? It was amazing. So to anybody that wants to start something, reach out. I will more than happy to. And I've done it with probably half a dozen, content creators now. This, and this. Right? Like, just do this. Do everything you want after that, but just do these things, and life will, life gets a fuck of a lot easier for you, right? So fast.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Yeah. And for a quick shout out, Scott, I can't think of his last name right now. No New Friends podcast. They're a podcast out of Florida. They're just absolutely hilarious. He reached out to me one day and he mentored me through a lot of these things in the early days. Absolutely tremendous show. So check them out. They're absolutely great. So there you go. Listen, Chad, we are at the top of the hour, which means it's time for my favorite part of the show, and that is the Daily Gratitudes. Hey guys, Daily Gratitudes are brought to you by Yatra Center here in Krabi, Thailand, where I reside. They are a trauma center. They treat trauma very, very, very well, and they do it in such a holistic way. Check them out, guys. You can learn more about them, and of course, see a bunch of episodes where Mike Miller, the head clinician, has come on at 828podcast.com/trauma. And in the meantime, here's Daily Gratitudes. So what are you grateful for today?
I'm grateful for being teachable today. I'm grateful for my job. I'm grateful for my ability to be resilient. And I'm grateful for the relationships in my life that are still around.
Awesome. I got it right off the bat. You're a great guest, Chad. I think, and I catch myself doing this all the time, defending myself for the need to be right rather than you know what I mean? Like, rather than just accepting what's being said to me and rethinking any, you know what I mean? So the way that we had that conversation, thank you for that.
Oh, thank you as well.
Because I don't know that I would have been as receptive to somebody else's ideas as you were. So that means a lot, right? You know what I mean? And for me, it goes back to echo you to being teachable. Like, fuck, remember this, man. Right? You were, parrot that when it comes time, because we do, God, a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing, and I have a little bit of knowledge about a lot of things. So,
man.
Yeah. I'm also super grateful. I got Sonny. Sometimes I heard his name. My dog. He allows me to connect in ways that it's just amazing. I get to run around Thailand with him and being an asshole in his little sidecar, and thinking he owns the world. So yeah. Hey, listen, I'm also grateful to every single person who continues to support this platform, liking, commenting, sharing, even just talking about the show, subscribing and following and all that stuff, guys. It makes a really big difference. And every time you do these things, it gets me a little bit closer to living my best life. My best life is to continue making a humble living, spreading the message. And the message is this: if you're in active addiction right now, today could be that day. Today could be the day that you start a lifelong journey. Reach out to a friend, reach out to a family member, go to a meeting, call into detox, pray, go to church. I don't care. Do whatever it is you got to do to get that journey started, because it is so much better than the alternative. If you have a loved one who's suffering an addiction right now, you're just taking the time to listen to this conversation. If you just take one more minute out of your day and text that person, let them know they are loved. Use the words,
"You are loved."
That little glimmer of hope just might be the thing that brings it back. Good episode.